Welcome to the Valseth View.
Hello and welcome back to the Valseth View with Carolyn Dragseth and Valerie Clark of Valseth Enterprises. Carolyn and Valerie combine legal, compliance, and strategic insight to help organizations navigate complex regulatory environments with confidence. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're unpacking the world of government contracting. Carolyn and Valerie will explain what it takes to compete effectively, win responsibly, and stay compliant every step of the way. Carolyn, Valerie, great to see you both.
Great
Hi,
to see you.
Kevin.
Let's start at the beginning. For organizations that have never worked with government entities before, what makes public sector contracting so different from private sector deals?
Well, in the private sector, I think it's really simple because you get, the board members or whoever, the CEOs in the room, they talk about what they want to do. We might have to, formulate a contract to concrete the process, and then you're off and running. Whereas within government contracting, there are more hoops you have to go through. But even though some of those hoops are kind of burdensome at the outset of working within government contracting, once you get the hang of it, it's very easy to do. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Valerie.
Just that in the government sector, there are a lot of regulations. So just like I had mentioned on another podcast, that education and training is an important part of every business who does federal contracting. Knowing that you have to do it for everything is going to be crucial because you have to stay on top of new changes and new regulations. So there are a lot of frameworks that must be set up, and we will discuss those a little bit more in depth in a minute.
I remember in previous jobs I've had over the years, I've had to do RFPs, requests for proposal for government entities, and wow, those were very complex.
Yes.
So Carolyn, from a legal perspective, what are some of the first eligibility or registration steps businesses should take before they even bid on a contract?
Well, I think that they need to look into two levels of government contracting. So the first is your state government contracting. There are a lot of states and cities that have an active RFP process, like you mentioned, where you can kind of break in. It's a good place for new companies to go through the steps of registering in the state RFP solicitation platform and then kind of working through what they have to do to respond to an RFP. And then the second portion of it would be at the federal level. And I know that we hear a lot about sam.gov, and a lot of people seem to be pretty afraid of going through that process. But registering within sam.gov is your step one. It's exactly where every business needs to start if they want to get into federal contracting. And I want to put it out there in the universe that you do not need a third party to do it for you. You can do your sam.gov registration yourself. It's going to take you a while. Some of the questions are hard, but I think that they've been very proactively working on their platform itself to make it a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit more transparent for the end user as they go through that initial registration process.
Valerie, what compliance frameworks should organizations be prepared to address early in the process? Things like equal opportunity reporting or things like that.
One of the things that I think is important for companies to understand is that when you're forming your business, or if you're pivoting and changing what the focus of your business is, you have to start compliance then. You can't wait and start compliance on step 3 or step 10 or even step 2. Compliance must be in the same room when conversations are being held at the very beginning of, we want to do federal contracting. What does that entail? What do we need to do? And some of the compliance frameworks which must be in place include your written policies and procedures. Some of the different industries have different policies and protocols you must follow, but there are some that are common to all, such as the equal employment opportunity laws. That's where you as a company state, and you have a process in place for employees to know and supervisors to understand that you will not discriminate on the basis of race, age, religion, sex, national origin, disability, things like that. Those policies and procedures must be written and in place prior to the beginning of starting this process. Additionally, federal contractors must also deal with the Office of Federal Contracts Compliance Program Agency, and they have some particular requirements for equal employment opportunity, for working with the veterans and working with those who have disabilities. So that is one of the frameworks. Another framework is that you need to have an understanding of ethics. What is ethics? How do you abide by ethics policies? And how do you get in trouble when you do things wrong?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, compliance is one of those scary words, right, for a lot of people, and
Yes.
True.
obviously organizations, they focus heavily on winning that contract, so they want to show their compliance and all that stuff. But why is post-award compliance just as critical as pre-award due diligence?
Well, I think post-award compliance is something that allows you to structure your business in such a way that it functions in the way the regulatory agencies really want it to work. And so I think that when you talk about post-award compliance, it's more of kind of the aspect that you mentioned, Valerie, where there's a very important critical element in training and in employee growth. And so it's an investment in your staff, because if you have a staff that's highly competent within the federal or even state government contracting realm, if they have someone from any of the agencies come and do an audit or do an inspection or do a contract administration review or do anything like that, they're going to be able to verbalize what they need to say and what they should be doing based on all of the current statutes and laws.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very good point. When you start compliance out at the very beginning, as you said earlier, compliance is a scary word, but when you do it right at the very beginning and you teach everybody along the way, compliance becomes less scary.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be understood that compliance is just what you have to do. As someone told me earlier in our relationship, you have to decide if you're going to learn it or not. And then you just learn it. You do what you have to do. And compliance actually becomes your friend, and it becomes your protection, because as you learn what to do correctly and as you do it correctly, when people come in and perform an audit in your business, you're not going to have unnecessary stress because of that, because they're just going to be doing today what they did yesterday and the day before and the day before that. And that's a huge part of being compliant and staying compliant, is doing it right every day from day one.
So if you have procedures in place, standard operating procedures, you have just everyone is on the same page and understands how compliance sort of fits into the company. As long as everybody's got that, you're saying it becomes sort of second nature almost.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Because it is scary, but it's more scary if you're just sort of just grabbing onto things and not having something in place. Yeah, makes sense to me. Carolyn, can you share an example of a situation where a business met all the bid requirements, but then ran into legal or contractual trouble after the fact?
Well, I'm going to share a story and then something about the kinds of services that we provide, kind of all wrapped in one. Oftentimes, small businesses do something or get involved in something without reading all of the fine print, which is very typical of some business owners. They're passionate people, entrepreneurs, really want to get things done. So they win the bid, and then all of a sudden they say, I don't know if I have everything in place to comply with this contract. So we do those compliance reviews with them. And what you do is you're sitting down with the company and you're reviewing, what does the FAR say, which are the federal acquisition rules, and how are you going to comply with that? What do the government travel regulations say? And then how are you going to teach your employees how to comply with that? So it's more of a process of going through and kind of taking the hand of that business owner and saying, these are all the things that you need to know to be in this area or in the realm of government contracting, and these are the things that you have to do. So I think a compliance review for any company, whether you're small or large, is really helpful, because it'll give you kind of that picture, a snapshot in time of how well you're doing certain things and how well you're not doing certain things. I think that within a compliance review, a lot of companies are pleasantly surprised to find out that their employees are doing really well in a certain area, and they may have really gotten the training and the understanding and the in-depth knowledge. And if they have, people who are working with them in the compliance realm within the company, they get it. And so they may be doing great in one area, but then again, they may be missing something in another. And so those are where you have to kind of watch for those pitfalls. And so when we go through and we do these kinds of compliance reviews for companies, we're kind of giving them what I would consider to be like a pre-audit. And it kind of gives them that warm, fuzzy feeling of I'm doing really well. And I'm very confident that if anyone were to walk in the door, I'm going to be able to knock it out of the park. I'm going to be able to point to the policies that I'm supposed to point to. My employees are going to be able to articulate whatever regulation they should be articulating and the why behind it. Because I think that if you are really working in this realm, it's important for your employees not only to understand what they're supposed to be complying with, but also why the federal government is asking them to do that. So it's a great hand in hand. And I think that if they go through these kinds of compliance reviews and you sit down with your staff and you kind of talk through, this is why the federal travel regulations state that you only get X amount of well, it's not even dollars, it's cents per mile, things like that, so that they understand if I travel somewhere, this is how much money I'm going to get back. This is something that is considered non-reimbursable, and why is it not reimbursable? So those are really kind of key points. And I think also it helps to build the corporate culture. If you have a corporation that is in compliance, new employees will see what older employees are doing, and they will mimic that, and they will understand why they're doing it.
I would just like to add something to that. Carolyn is on point with everything she said. One of the reasons that it's important to understand compliance from the beginning, once you win a bid and you sit down and you really start focusing on putting things into action, if you missed anything in your setup, it could cost you money. One of the reasons for doing grants and solicitations is to provide a service to the federal government to make the world better, to make America better, but it's also to have a profitable company. And if you are not positive that you have met all those metrics, or that you even understand what those metrics are, then you could get into some trouble at the very beginning, not knowing what your bottom line needs to be and having to find some money somewhere because you forgot to do something. And that's where the services that we provide come in as well. Is that's our job to know that you've hit everything.
Yeah, I've known people who just say yes to everything and figure it out later. That's,
it's not the way to do this.
Not the way to do this.
It's very stressful especially for the owners. If they do that, if they do put the cart before the horse, it's very difficult. And those are the clients that'll call you with their hair on fire saying, oh my gosh, I just won $1 million award. And I don't know if I have all of the policies that I need to have. And I don't know if I've trained my employees adequately. And so it always helps to have that kind of second layer of security, where if you've had someone do a compliance review for you, you're going to know where you're strong, you're going to know where you're weak, and you're going to know what's left for you to do in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Valerie, monitoring requirements and documentation often can feel pretty overwhelming, especially for smaller vendors. What systems or habits have you found might help them stay organized and perhaps audit ready throughout the contract term?
If I had to choose one word for compliance and the systems and the frameworks, is consistency. You need to be consistent about what you do. Again, that's going to start with the education and training of the staff. It's going to start with the understanding of the executive management of what needs to be put into place. Some of the things that you are going to have, we've mentioned earlier, like the EEO systems, the employment law processes, those training regulations, and those training dates and times. When you work with your employees, and you need to start out as if you're going to win contracts. Otherwise, why really do what you're doing? But you need to start out as if you're going to win and have one, so that you have everything already in place. And one of the major ways of doing that is by having a online human resources policy and procedure program. What I would like to see when I go in is that there is a system of policies that is developed, but instead of employees getting maybe a one-time email or a monthly email about any new policies which have come forth, I would rather see an email stating that policy 709 is now ready for your review. Please review it by the 15th of the month. If you have not done so by the 17th of the month, your supervisor will be in touch with you. And there needs to be a common, consistent protocol that is followed for people who do the training versus the people who don't. And part of that is because you need to be consistent in how you treat all of these things. And they need to know that if your supervisor contacts you on the 17th, they're going to expect A, B, C, and D. If you don't do A, B, C, and D, then these are the consequences. And part of this strict structure is to make sure that we are in compliance with all of the regulations, all of the contractual obligations that we're going to sign, that we're going to do. That is one particular system.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree completely with what Valerie has said about that. And I think that it also helps on being audit ready. If you're using a system, you have somewhere to track everything. So if they were to ask you who has completed this, you can just pull a report.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it a lot simpler.
One other thing I will share is, well, two. The first one is, for every solicitation that you win, every grant that you win, you need to have one compliance person on that project. Meaning there's one compliance person who is in charge of everything. The second thing I would add is, for each grant that is won, you need to have one folder online. It can be through SharePoint, it can be through Google Workspace, it can be a file on the hard drive, but everything for that particular proposal goes in there. Every receipt, every timesheet, every email, every discussion internally, everything goes in there. And the reason for that is, when you're audited, you don't have to worry about, oh gosh, do I have everything? Who did this? Who did that? As things are put in there as time goes along, when you're audited, it's going to be there. Mm-hmm. And your compliance person is going to help you make sure that it's there.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. As we finish up here, for leaders considering government contracting is part of their growth plan, what would you say is one piece of advice you would each give to make sure that they enter this space strategically and sustainably?
Strategically and sustainably for me would be, think about how your operation is going to run. Do a diagram of how you're going to fold compliance into what you're doing, so that you have an action plan at the beginning of the process. And I think that it's important what Valerie mentioned, having one point of contact, because that person can be your quote unquote expert, and they will be the one that can help you navigate that process if you are audited.
Mine is very similar to that. It's everything goes from the top down. We all know that. And that's very critical to make sure that it remains that way. But equally important to me is to make sure that the information that needs to get out to your managers, to your different sections, to your supervisors, to your frontline employees actually gets there. Mm-hmm. And then through that process, you're going to confirm that by conversations you have with them, by if something comes up and the supervisor needs to provide direction. Well, she knows how to do that because she has learned about that particular compliance regulation or that particular internal process which is desired. So that line of communication has to stay open, top to bottom and bottom to top. And there must be an atmosphere of, it's okay to make a mistake. and I'm going to tell you what my mistake is because I know we can correct it.
Yeah, both points very good. I also, Valerie, I really agree with what you said earlier about the having like a Google folder or some sort of a folder, like one location for everything. Because boy, nothing confuses things quicker than when you try to have too many apps or too many, tools, if you will, that end up just clouding everything up. All right, well, that wraps up today's episode of the Valseth View with Carolyn Dragseth and Valerie Clark of Valseth Enterprises. To learn more about how their integrated legal and compliance approach helps organizations succeed in the public sector, visit valsethenterprises.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. We very much appreciate it. Valerie, Carolyn, always great chatting with you both. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kevin. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.